Lidge to read the invocation and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay. Good evening. I wanted to thank my fellow board members and the Rock County staff for taking time out of their lives. Most of us have given time up with our families and friends this evening in advance to attend meetings. At times, we may not always agree on the issues, but I think it is to be expected to have a great team and a good representation of Rock County. I found this quote that I kind of felt like it was our board. And the quote is unknown, but it's, sometimes we do get it wrong, but it's okay. It's the only way to figure out how to do it right. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Lisa, please call the roll.
Beaver, Bobzien, Camp, Bryan, Clayson, Crary, Cullen, Davis, Holman, Knutson, Levy, Mawhinney, Peer, Pennycook, Rashkin, Schneider, Scholes, Stevens, Sutherland, Sweeney, Towns, Whitledge, Wilson, Winter, Woodman, Zorro, Bostwick.
Here.
24 present, 3 absent, 2 vacant.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is consent agenda. 4A, adoption of agenda. 4B, approval of minutes from August 10th, 2023. 4E, other, awarding contract for the detention grade furniture installation for the new Law Enforcement Services Jail Building Addition. E2, awarding the contract for the installation of an in-building distributed antenna system at Law Enforcement Services, LES Jail. 3, retaining engineering firm for commissioning the new Information Technology Data Center. 4, awarding contract for the Shelter Care Services. 5, to designate a qualified newspaper for all Rock County legal publications for 2024. 6, accepting the Public Health Vending Machine Grant and amending the Sheriff's Office budget. Item 11D is being pulled from the agenda, establishing Rock County's policy and commitment to oppose human trafficking. That is the end of the consent agenda.
Any objections to items on the consent agenda? Any questions about items on the consent agenda? Supervisor Stevens.
Yes, Mr. Chair. The item about Derek's house, I'd like to have that removed because I'd like to have a discussion on that.
And that is item 4C.
Is it
Yeah.
E4?
E4.
So E4,
Awarding contract.
move down
for
to
Shelter Care Services.
to 11F.
Any other questions or objections? Seeing none, with the exception of the item with moved from Supervisor Stevens, the consent agenda is passed. Next item, please.
Next item is public hearing. 5A, amending 4.205 of the Rock County Code of Ordinances, zoning of shorelands, minimum lot size and setbacks, first reading.
I declare the public hearing open at this point. Are there any citizens that wish to speak on this item? Any citizens wishing to speak on this item? Any citizens wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none, declare the public hearing closed. Next item, please.
Next item, item 6, citizen participation, communications, and announcements. We have several people signed up to speak this evening. We will call your name. Please come up to the podium. You will be given 2 minutes to speak. Please state your name and municipality. Our first speaker is Anisha Welsh. Next on deck is Rhonda Daughtery. Sorry if I butchered your names.
Good evening. Rhonda Doherty had a family emergency, and I have a written statement from her, and I'm wondering if I could be allowed to read her brief written statement.
You may.
So that's 4 minutes then?
2.
Breathing doesn't count, right? I'll read my statement first, and then I'll read Rhonda's. Good evening, I'm Anissa Welch, 877 Arthur Drive, Milton. I'm speaking on the wage grid and one of the board's stated goals of recognizing employees with longevity. Wisconsin State Statute, Section 59, gives the entire board complete authority to establish regulations of employment, provide, fix, or change the salary or compensation for any person paid from the county treasury, with few exceptions only limited by express language. I've been with the county for 30 years, and I am on my 5th term as mayor of the city of Milton. I have an understanding of levy limits, expenditure restraint, municipal debt, budgets, and investing in employees. I want to express my sincere appreciation to all of you for the investment and hard work that you all have put into to continue to revise the county compensation structure. It was never going to be easy, and it was never going to be cheap. It has been in the DNA of Rock County for decades to have employees working for wages that are under comparable counties and below market. Budgets are complex. There's many factors, including not limiting the state decreasing shared revenue year after year, which recently has been amended to increase shared revenue. I know it's not enough. The most significant COLA I received, along with hundreds of others, took place right after I was hired 30 years ago, and it was 4%, and it was from an arbitration decision. It was so long ago that the overwhelming majority of staff and administration that negotiated and attended that arbitration hearing have all died. To complicate the county digging out from the workforce challenges and wage challenges over the past 40 years, even organizations that were able to invest more in employees, wage gains have gone largely to the highest earners, with only 3% going to the working class and 15.7% going to salaried. That does not include the wage gap between CEO pay. A couple of issues have come up with the wage grid. 40 long-term employees have become red circled. And that was presented as being off the wage grid, and I understand that. They are overwhelmingly in a protected class of over 40. They will not get a full cost of living adjustment their entire careers left at Rock County. It doesn't have to be this way. I know it doesn't, because in the city of Milton, we don't have a policy of red circling our employees. We look at them as a benefit. And without our employees, the city of Milton does not exist. And without the county employees, the county cannot exist.
Okay, your time is up.
And I would encourage you all to revisit that portion of the wage grid as you did the wages for the DPW staff at the staff meeting Monday. And do you want me just not to read Rhonda's and just submit it?
2 minutes is up.
Okay. I will be submitting my full statement, which is longer than 2 minutes because of my need to breathe. Also in my statement, it refers to the state statutes that gives the county board full authority on wages and regulations, and I will also submit Rhonda Doherty's statement. Thank you.
Next speaker is Stacy Bicconi.
Hello, Board. My name is Stacy Piccioni. I'm not only a resident of Rock County, Beloit, Wisconsin, I am an employee of Rock County. I have been here for 28 years. I'd like to read a letter that was submitted to all the county board members several weeks ago, and I wanted to make sure that all of you, if you weren't able to read it in an email, would be able to hear it from me today. Dear Rock County Board and Staff Committee members, recently the Rock County Human Services Wage Grid recommended by McGrath was released. 45 long-term human services employees were red circled, which means that we will no longer receive raises for the rest of our careers with Rock County. In addition, we will only receive half of the cost of living increase that the remaining Rock County employees will receive. In essence, this equates to a pay cut for those 45 employees who have dedicated their professional working careers to Rock County and its citizens. These same 45 employees each have between 10 to 38 years of service to the children and families of Rock County. We did not grieve the results of the wage grid because we were told that we could only grieve our placement in our wage group and not our wages. It is our understanding that McGrath recommended acknowledging and rewarding employees for their longevity. Instead, the county intends to halt any wage increase. In addition, it appears administration received a significant wage increase. This is unacceptable, extremely disheartening, and disappointing. If the goal of the wage study was to recruit and retain dedicated employees, what has occurred defeats this purpose and will likely cause continued issues with retaining the employees who are committed to long-term employment with Rock County. We also understand that there are at least 2 other Wisconsin counties who have consulted with McGrath, and their long-term employees not only receive salary increases, but they will also continue receiving raises through the duration of their employment. We thank you for your attention to this important matter. We hope that you will review the McGrath recommendation as it relates to our concerns. The 32 Rock County employees below have a total of 866 years of experience, expertise, dedication, and commitment, not only to Rock County, but to its citizens as well. Mark Huber, 38-year veteran of Rock County. Phil Story, 37-year veteran.
Can you wind up, please? Your 2 minutes has come.
There are obviously in this letter all of the individuals who support this letter being sent and being reiterated to the board. And again, this email has been sent to all of you, so it would be appreciated if you would look at that. Thank you so much for your time.
Stacy, do you happen to know the date of that email so people could easily look back and find that? Or a
Not
rough,
right off the
rough
top of
time?
my head.
Do you want to submit that copy of
I
the
could,
email?
yep. I have some notes in it. You're welcome.
Next speaker is Craig Keller.
Hello, I'm Craig Keller. I live at 319 South Gilbert Street in Footville, Wisconsin. I'm here tonight. I understood that there was been a new proposal brought forth about the human trafficking issue in Rock County. I guess one of my concerns with it is that it's more or less a try to make everybody feel good. There's been a couple things that have happened since all of this has gone down that's really caused me some pretty serious concern with the issue. Part of it being money that was requested for the Rock County Task Force a month or so ago, an amount of $3,000 that was voted down. I don't know if it was because of confusion or miscommunication or what the circumstances were. I know there's a big article recently about a safe house and some funding to being set aside to build a safe house for the Rock County Task Force. And, you know, reading the article, they commented about how they were never asked or approached about it. But I vividly recall being at their presentation down at the Beloit Library, in which they were asked what they would need in terms of funding or things to make their job easier and better to try and curb this issue of child sex trafficking and human trafficking in general. And one of the things that was mentioned down there was a building that they could have, that they could call their own as a safe house, where they could counsel and work with these people that are being sex trafficked and all of that. It's very concerning to me as a former law enforcement officer. You know, I think back to a movie with Matthew McConaughey with a young lady. She was a young black girl that was viciously raped and brutalized. And I guess I'm going to ask everybody here to close their eyes and think about that, and think about if it's their child or their grandchild or anything like that that is getting torn up and put into this kind of stuff, and how they would feel if it happened to them. We got all this money that we can do for childcare, for helping businesses get started. Those are all great things. But when it comes to our children and protecting them, we throw them away like a bag of trash, in my opinion.
Craig, your time is up.
So I guess that's all I would like, and for people to consider that.
That was the last speakers that has signed up. Would anyone else want to speak this evening? I would if I could. Please come up. Please state your name and municipality.
Tracy Bushaw, and I work for Rock County Human Services. My address feels like 1717 Sumner Avenue on a regular 24-hour around-the-clock basis, but I love every minute of it. I have been with Rock County Human Services for 21 years. I came here because I wanted to come here. The people that I have with me here tonight, and I guess Brent Sutherland, I am an influencer. I care about the staff I work with. I care about Rock County Human Services. It's difficult for me to get up here and to speak as I shake. But to take a look at what has happened to us being red circled is very upsetting. And you as board members, I have spoke with quite a few, and I don't think that you understood or knew that we were going to be red circled. And I fully believe that 100%. I do believe in the presentation that was given to the staff committee and also too by Josh at that final board meeting before the final vote came. Red circling wasn't mentioned. It wasn't stated, for if it was, I fully have faith in you that you would have stopped it. It would have never happened. It affects, in the last 3 years of us who want to retire, what our retirement is going to be set at. So not only does it affect us now, but it affects us in the long run. And I want you all to know that. These are my friends. These are the people for the last 21 years that we have all stuck together, and we respect one another. We respect you as a board. And we respect you to do the right thing. Resolutions can happen. If you would have been refreshed at that final meeting, this wouldn't have happened. I have faith in you. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
Any communications from supervisors? Supervisor Zorl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today marks 1 year since we've lost Nolan Rice, a fourth grader at Adams Elementary. A young life full of promise, cut short due to a failing system that starts at our nation's borders. Let's be clear. Border security isn't just a federal issue. When it leads to a tragedy in our community, it's our issue too. This is not about politics. It's about right and wrong. The federal government's failure has real consequences, and it's time we stand united to demand better. In Nolan's memory, let's turn our grief into action. Secure borders are not just a federal responsibility. They're a moral imperative for all of us. Thank you.
Any other supervisors with communications? Anything from staff? Randy?
We sent out an email a couple days ago and we have a yellow sheet in front of you on the budget. So next meeting, Josh is going to present in the 2024 budget. And we could, if you could bring in your 3-ring binder if you have one from last year so we could recycle and reuse that. But just giving you a chance then also to fill out this sheet. I have 15 already county board members that turned it in. What type of document you want for the 24 budget. There's 3 options: the spiral bound, which is the shorter version, the 3-ring binder, or just the online version. So if you could get this sheet back to me, I'd appreciate it, and/or if you could bring in the 3-ring binder, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Anything else from staff? Seeing none, next item, please.
Next item, item 7, nominations, appointments, and confirmations. 7A, appointment to the Ad hoc Advisory Committee on the Future of Rock Haven.
Moved by Supervisor Mohini, seconded by Supervisor Crary. Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Next item.
Next item, 7B, appointment to the Behavioral Health Redesign Steering Committee.
Moved by Supervisor Peer, seconded by Supervisor Towns. Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Next item, please.
7C, appointment to the Evidence-Based Decision-Making Committee.
Moved by Supervisor Levy, seconded by Supervisor Whitledge. Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Next item, please.
Item 7D, appointments to the Environmental Management Services Committee.
Moved by Supervisor Winter, seconded by Supervisor Bryan. Discussion? Supervisor Mohini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I find it interesting that at the May 25th meeting, Supervisor Zorro spoke against this committee being formed. He thought it could be done by other committees and things like that. I guess I'm just wondering if he's changed his tune, if he thinks that he can be open-minded on this committee and work together with them. Thank you.
Other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Next item, please.
Item 7E, confirmation of appointment of the Human Resources Director, Amy Spoden.
Moved by Supervisor Mohini, seconded by Supervisor Levy. Josh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As some of you know, we've gone through this process of appointing other department heads, and so it's been a similar process where we've recruited and interviewed and gone in front of staff committee, and the recommendation is to appoint Amy Spoden as the next HR director. I think you all are familiar with Amy as our current assistant HR director and interim HR director, where she's been interim HR director many times. So I feel she's certainly qualified to step into this role that she's been performing for not only a period here, but for many times over the past several years. So sometimes I ask that individual to come up and say a few words, but Amy's been up here several times already, and so I don't think she needs to come up and say anything, and she may be up here later today. So in any case, I just ask for your support in confirming Amy's appointment.
Discussion. Supervisor Zorl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is just a question. How many candidates did we consider for that job?
Well, at different levels, we considered different numbers of folks. We did interview, in our first round, we interviewed 4. So that was the group from the larger group that we went through. I don't remember off the top of my head how many applicants there were, but we narrowed down, brought in 4 in the first round, and then narrowed it down from there.
Other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Next item, please.
Was there an oppose? Yes. Thank you. Next item, 7F, Chair appointment to the Environmental Management System Committee.
Moved by Supervisor Sutherland, seconded by Supervisor Winter. Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that new person is Supervisor Cullen. His name did not get mentioned, but I'll mention it now, so congratulations. Next item, please.
Item 8, recognition of county employees or others. 8A, recognizing Vicki Edwardson for service to Rock County.
Moved by Supervisor Beaver, seconded by Supervisor Towns. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Vicki is here.
It is my honor, excuse me, to present this resolution to Vicki. Whereas Vicki Edwardson has served the citizens of Rock County for the past 26 years as a dedicated and valued employee of Rock County Child Support Services and is retiring on September 1st, 2023. And whereas Vicki Edwardson began her career with the Rock County Child Support Services on May 5th, 1997 as a clerk typist 2 and promoted to a clerk typist 3 on January 1st, 1998. And whereas Vicki Edwardson transferred to the UW Extension Office on May 28, 2002, and then to the Circuit Courts on May 31st, 2003. And whereas Vicki Edwardson returned to Child Support Services as a clerk typist 3 on November 14, 2003. Vicki Edwardson has served the citizens of Rock County as a valued member of the clerk typist 3 team in Child Support Services, providing exceptional customer service to child support customers and offering superior clerical support to caseworkers within the office. And whereas the Rock County Board of Supervisors, representing the citizens of Rock County, wishes to commend Vicki on her years of service and enjoy your retirement. You deserve it. That's a hard
Thank
job
you.
that you do, so.
It was awesome, though.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You're welcome. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Next item, please.
Next item, 8B, recognizing Commander Eric Shelvold.
Moved by Supervisor Beaver, seconded by Supervisor Peer. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Mr. Shelvold is not here this evening. Next item, please.
Next item, 8C, recognizing Dale Rocket.
Moved by Supervisor Mohini, seconded by Supervisor Crary. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Mr. Rocket is not here either. Next item, please.
Item 9, introduction of new resolutions or ordinances by supervisors for referral to appropriate committee.
Any supervisors wishing to introduce a new resolution, please bring it forward at this time. Supervisor Cullen, if you would give us a brief summary of your proposed resolution.
My resolution is amending the Rock County Board of Supervisors rules and procedures to eliminate the second vice chair.
Supervisor Zorel, a brief summary of your proposed resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a resolution to safeguard public access to retained records. The way it works is before records are destroyed and lost forever, we need to allow the public an opportunity to know what those records are in case they want to request it before they can never get it.
Thank you. Any others wishing to come forward with a proposed resolution? Seeing none, next item, please.
Next item, 10, reports. 10A, Sheriff's Office Crime Prevention Team.
Okay, another in our series of sheriff presentations.
Check, check, check. Is that okay? You guys hear me? Good. All right, well, thank you for having me back. My name is Sergeant Andrew Reed. I'm the training coordinator for the Rock County Sheriff's Office. I was here to do the cadet presentation, and I'm here to do our community engagement team. I've been with you frequently, but trust me, I am not that important. So, our community engagement team comprises of a couple of deputies, sergeants, and correctional officers. We have a community engagement team where we go to community events. We'll host community events. And then if we can't get any community engagement team members to go, then we'll open up to all staff, and then all staff can go to these events. Okay. So this handsome fellow here, and that was a Janesville Splash event that Janesville Police Department hosted. And this was a heritage community event, but it is open up to all sworn, all corrections, and all staff members, or support team members like Nicole. The benefits of our community engagement team, we develop community partnerships. We do a lot of talking. I do a lot of talking with a lot of community partners. We hear community members' concerns, from traffic complaints in their neighborhood to any other type of concerns that they might have where they live. Establish positive relationships with community members. We increase trust and transparency with our community. We try to hit all around the Rock County area. We share our crime prevention strategies. I do talk with Janesville Police Department a lot on how they run their events. They have someone that's kind of new to some of their events, so they may reach out to us as well. We educate our community on agency capabilities and resources. The kids love our airboat. And then we promote career opportunities in criminal justice. So at a lot of these events, even though they might just be community events in general, I do a lot of recruiting to get people to put in for a correctional officer, support staff, and deputy as well. So this is that Janesville Splash event right here. It wasn't everybody. I don't think we could have got everybody in the picture, but if we had to estimate 400 people came to this event, so it was awesome, super awesome. And the kids absolutely love our squads. We also do career fairs. This year, just from memory, we have, from career fairs, 1 new correctional officer. We have a person that just passed our deputy test, and he has an interview coming up. And this year, I think that might be it from the career fairs. Some interns, and we've got some interns from these career fairs, which is awesome. Great recruiting tool for us. We have our Rock County Dairy Breakfast, which I'm sure some of you also attend. We have a pretty good showing there too. We probably have about 5 deputies that we have at the Rock County Dairy Breakfast, and it's an awesome event for us. This is last year's picture, and this is this year's picture. We also do 2 Special Olympic events each year. We'll start with Cop on a Rooftop, which basically, we go to the Dunkin' Donuts throughout the entire county, and then we collect money for Special Olympics, and that money goes completely to the Special Olympics program. Those Special Olympics athletes and representatives will also attend with us. And then after that, we'll do our torch run, which we start at the sheriff's office, and then we block traffic, and we run all the way down Highway 14, all the way to Jimmy John's, and Jimmy John's supports us every year by providing a lunch to all the athletes and all the officers that participate in this event. And this, the Cops on a Rooftop I want to mention is not just here, it's throughout the entire state on the same day. Oop, did I go too fast? There we go. We have the Rock County 4-H Fair, so we don't provide just patrol operations at Rock County Fair, we also have a tent there. And that tent we split with all of the other agencies within the county, Evansville, Clinton, Janesville, Beloit, which is an awesome event for us. And then we also display our special teams to all the community that attend the fair that day. So it's an awesome way for us to also connect with other agencies during this time too. And of course, the kids absolutely love it. And our National Night Out. So we don't host our own National Night Out, but we do hit all the other agencies that do host National Night Out. It's just a time frame for where families and their community members can come out and talk with their police departments or their fire departments or all the first responders in their jurisdiction, and we attend as well. And we'll bring equipment and answer any questions and just spend time with the community. We do a lot of school visits throughout the year, from reading books to mental health awareness for middle schoolers, just showing our squad car. A lot of the kids like to interact with our K-9 team. I think that's up here, isn't it? Yeah, right there. But in general, when we get a request from a school teacher or anything like that, we will make that event. So we do a lot of school visits. I don't think we could probably do an entire presentation on school visits that we do. Our trunk or treats are coming up. So basically what we do is we attend whatever community event is being hosted. I know Beloit's placing theirs. I think there's the first one, Beloit? No. We hand out a lot of candy to a lot of kids from a trunk, basically. All right? It's a really great way for kids to like cops if you can give them a candy bar. So, but it's an awesome event to see the kids all dressed up and that and interact with us, go in the squad cars. It's a lot of fun. And then our winter event, it's Janesville, right? Janesville's Winter Parade, which is great. So a lot of people that get cooped up in their houses over the winter stand on the curb in minus 20-degree weather and watch us go by with our lights on and hand candy to the kids. So it's a great event. We also do Shop with a Cop, which is awesome. Walmart did it this year. Did Farm and Fleet do it this year? And Farm and Fleet. And what they do is they donate cards to these kids, underprivileged kids, and we'll connect with school resource officers in the area to identify underprivileged kids to get them gift cards so that they can go shopping at either Walmart or Farm and Fleet. And just a quick story, we have to encourage these kids to purchase gifts for themselves, because the very first thing that they want to do is to spend the money on their families or their brothers and sisters, which is awesome, but we want them to purchase something for them. So sometimes we don't win the fight, and they still buy for their family, which is sweet. But it's a great event, great kids. Very thankful for both Walmart and Farm and Fleet for donating that every year. Every year they do that. So our community engagement team members enjoy attending a wide variety of all events throughout the entire year. This is only a very small tip of the iceberg of community events that we do. I appreciate all your guys' support in it. It's awesome. I love it. Sometimes I have to take a bunch of water with me because I get dry mouth because I'm talking to so many people. But I appreciate all your guys' support, really do. Does anybody have any questions at all? And just real quick, so we also do, and the rec safety guys do this mostly, but we do bowling with kids, all right, gutter busters, and then we do also fishing, so cops and bobbers, and we do, you're gonna have to remind me, Nicole, is it 3 cops and bobbers a year? 3 I got something right. And then 2 gutter busters. Yeah, 2 gutter busters every year. So it's also a great way for like, to educate even the adults or our parents on the equipment that we have. So we love showing off our airboat, it's awesome. A complete necessity on our part to have at the sheriff's office, but also a tool that the community doesn't understand or even aware that we even have. So it's a great way to answer questions as well. All right, well, thank you so much for your time, thank you.
Next item, please.
Next item, 11, new business, 11A, supplementary appropriations and budget changes. 11A1, accepting the WEC absentee ballot envelope subgrant and amending the county clerk budget.
Moved by Supervisor Mohini, seconded by Supervisor Wilson. Supervisor Mohini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll call on Lisa. She does have samples of that.
So the Election Commission approved new envelopes, and we can't use our old ones next year. So just a comparison, this is the old one, and this is the new one. There are multiple versions, depending on what they're for. So just another one, this is the old one, and this is the new one. So it's going to make it easier for voters to use. The subgrant helps us replace all those ballots envelopes that we can't use.
Discussion. This is roll call. Please vote.
$24 yes, 0 no, 5 absent.
Next item, please.
Next item, item 11C, authorizing the extension of 3 additional deputy sheriff's positions through December of 2026.
Moved by Supervisor Knutson, seconded by Supervisor Beaver. Supervisor Beaver.
I appreciate your time with this. This is a continuation basically of a resolution we had done before that was going to run out in April. Part of the goal with this is to be able to put people into the academy that starts in January with the intention that they would, with anybody going to the academy, by the time they get through the academy and their training, it's usually 8 to 9 months before they're ready to go. So if we end up delaying things, it creates obviously situations where we're short. We end up needing overtime to cover it. So this is an attempt to try to get ahead of that a little bit. With our academy coming up, we would probably be looking to send 5 in January. Without this resolution going through, we know some people are going to retire. We just don't know their exact date yet. And we could end up with somebody in the academy that if we hired them, once that resolution runs out in April, we would end up having to lay them off or something like that, and we want to avoid that type of circumstance. But this just gives us a chance to make sure we have people ahead of time and that we're better prepared as we go in. The academy is only offered twice a year, January and August. So that's why these things kind of tie our hands a little bit. We typically only like to send people to the Blackhawk Academy here where we have instructors and we have some say as to how things go and keep a better eye on them because it's right in our own neighborhood. And I like sending people to Blackhawk, obviously. So, any questions on it at all?
Supervisor Zorro?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This resolution's coming to the board about 2 weeks later than originally intended. Is that going to cause any problems for you or no problems at all?
No, we should be good now. My concern was if it would get drug out longer, then we would potentially lose some of the candidates that we might have been able to hire. Just because they're in high demand. Back when I had put in, what seems like 100 years ago, there were 400 or 500 people that put in for each of the positions. And you don't have that anymore. None of the agencies have that anymore. So you gotta act a little quicker and be a little more of a proponent when you're hiring people.
Other comments, questions? This is roll call, please vote.
Twenty-four yes, 0 no, 3 absent, 2 vacant.
Next item, please.
Next item is 11E, amending Chapter 18 of the Rock County ordinances.
Moved by Supervisor Levy, seconded by Supervisor Crary. Amy?
This is a resolution amending the Rock County Personnel Ordinance. I'm happy to take questions if anybody has them.
Questions for Amy? Questions? Supervisor Knutson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you address the red circling and how that can, where we're at, how that can be corrected?
Are related to the comments that were brought forward in the public comment?
Yes.
Can I?
I just make sure that we feel like this is a consistent question with the ordinance adoption.
So is the red circling provision in the ordinance or is it in the policy and procedure manual?
Red circling language is in the ordinance.
It is in the ordinance?
It is on the ordinance.
Then it's pertinent to adoption of the ordinance if it's part of the ordinance.
Look at the page here. Red circle, page 38. So currently, the language reads, red circling classification is 18.410. And the language currently reads, employees in the classification that are to be red circled will be frozen at their current salary until the salary of the pay range to which they are assigned equals or exceeds their rate of pay. Employees whose classifications have been red circled shall receive 1/2 of the across-the-board increase granted to an employee until the salary of the pay range to which they are assigned equal or exceeds their rate of pay. So that's the current language. So are you just asking to explain like what that means related to the salary study? Well, the board could obviously amend the language that's currently identified as in the red circled classifications, or there would need to be a further conversation about re-looking at the parameters that were set forth with the salary study. I would say that would be probably the two options that you would have.
Amy, what lines in the resolution is that?
That language not in the resolution. This is, the red classification was not part of the resolution because we weren't changing that language.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Supervisor Holman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Amy, I got a question for you. There's a lot of issues with the red circling and also with the pay structure. Might it be to our benefit as the board to get a better clarity of exactly where our county is going for our workers? And I don't see a whole lot of benefit in this wage study that's been presented to the employees. You can hear by their voices, and there's a lot of them, and they're speaking of the dissatisfaction of how this is shaking out. So would there be a better way to go about this and looking forward to taking care of our employees that we value so much and do it in proper and more meaningful manner for them?
So the resolution, the salary study was approved by the board. So if the board is interested in re-looking at that, that would be something that the staff committee or the board themselves would request to have that reopened. Because that was approved on a resolution, I believe it was the 27th of April.
Mr. Chair, at this time, I don't know if this is proper or prudent, but may I ask for that extension to get this better for clarification and better wage appropriations for our employees?
So I think we're really talking about two separate things. The resolution that right now is about making changes to the ordinance. The salary study itself is not contained within the ordinance. So the resolution at hand is related to a procedure in a booklet. The salary study is a separate resolution that's not in this resolution.
This is pertaining basically to what Brian was saying on red flag or red circling then?
That language, the red circling language is in the ordinance. But the salary study itself is not contained in this document.
That can be re-looked at soon, then I take it.
So just to be clear and to clarify, so there's a action item in front of you, which is about making amendments to the personnel ordinance, which includes language, of course, that affects how people are treated on the wage grid, right? So there's an overlap there. And there is a separate policy and procedure manual as well that affects how people are treated on the wage grid. But I think if you're requesting to the chair that an agenda item be on a future agenda, then that's separate than the action items in front of you. So I don't know what's a germane request, if the timing is correct, to.
I think that can be dealt with later. That's really not germane to what we're talking about right now.
Okay, thank you, sir. Then I will give up my position right this second on this, and I will revisit this with you. Then we will go after this. Thank you.
Supervisor Towns?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to say I have concerns with this for a couple things. One, most of the cleanup, which is what this is, I can understand some of it's obsolete since we went to the grid and that. This is the section which we've just been discussing in light of the contacts board members have been getting from the folks who were in that category, and we've talked about it a number of times. When we did vote on this and approve the wage grid, it was with the understanding that we would have a discussion about longevity and that it was a priority. And we knew that there would be people who would fall into this category, and we would have to have some kind of discussion about how to deal with them. And so I think we're there right now. And it's right here in our face, and we do need to deal with it. We did deal with one of the issues at the last staff meeting, but this is the other one that still needs to be discussed and a decision made. So that's in the details of some of the changes or lack of changes in here that, like Supervisor Holman, I think we do need to have a discussion about it before just passing it on. The second thing that bothers me about this is bothers me a little bit is that it's changing the process somewhat from how, who oversees the change of rules. And I would wish, and I would ask you, Josh, if you could explain that, just so every board member knows that they are voting away some of their authority when they vote for this.
Sure. So as I had alluded to in my last comment, there are two documents that govern the rules that apply to staff, how staff are treated with their benefits and wages. So one is the ordinance that's in front of you, the personnel ordinance. And like all other ordinances, we have ordinances that are about, as you saw earlier tonight, there's about in the planning department, right? There's ordinances that cover those things. We have highway ordinances that cover the speed limits on county highways. We have ordinance about forfeitures for certain county, violations of county, crimes, so to speak. So that's at the ordinance level, and that process is, there's a public hearing, which you've already experienced a couple times in your last two meetings, and then it comes to you like any other resolution for approval. And then the policy and procedure manual is governed by the County Board Staff Committee. And so there are two different documents that govern it, and one of the reasons that we're trying to adjust this is that there's a good level of redundancy. So for example, in the ordinance here, there's like 90 pages of ordinance. I think what there are here is 23 specific changes where language is being either incorporated or moved to the policy and procedure manual. So the difference the Supervisor Towns alludes to is that in the policy and procedure manual, those changes can be approved by the County Board Staff Committee. The ordinance must be approved by the full county board. So to the extent that those of you, have concerns about who gets to approve what, that's, I think, what Supervisor Towns is alluding to. So that's the process.
Thank you. And just to follow up then, so this will be moving these statements from the ordinance where there would be a public hearing available to them if there was to be a change, just so that the staff committee could just, or so that the administration committee can just make the changes, correct, and bring it to staff committee.
Correct.
Supervisor Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are we able to make an amendment on the red circling for this ordinance?
Yeah, you're changing the personnel ordinance. So yes, and just by some history and some context of red circling, and Amy can certainly fill in, that's not a new practice. It's been a longstanding sort of practice as we've done wage studies over the year, that as an employee is earning above where the new range is that they're going to be placed in already, we're not going to cut their pay, but what we do is we red circle them so that their peers would climb quicker, so that eventually they would be even and at market, the same as their peers in the same job classifications. So that's the purpose of red circling. Whether it's good or bad is up to the board. The goal is to get people at peer level with their within the market to their peers there. I don't know, we haven't had any internal discussions about how we would change it or what the way to change it, what the economic consequences of eliminating it would be. So it's hard, I think, for me or for other staff to offer, what would be the amendment that would be effectuate what you would want, if that would be the case. I would say if you want to have a very serious conversation about red circling, it would be really appropriate for the County Board Staff Committee to take that up at its next County Board Staff Committee meeting to talk about red circling, what it means, the economic effects of it, because it does have some pretty serious economic effects on both sides.
So then how do we move forward if we'd want to do that? Do we have to amend it here now?
Well, so there's two ways to do it. So one would be to send the whole thing back to County Board Staff Committee. So that's a motion to recommit. That's pretty significant. There are significant changes within Chapter 18, which is the personnel ordinance, that are affected. Overtime rules, vacation rules, rules that we had duplicated in the policy and procedure manual that we're simplifying into one rule place so that everybody knows where the rules are. Speaking as someone who spends a lot of time in these documents and helps department heads and helps employees navigate them, they are confusing because we often have things in multiple places. So you have to look in multiple places to make sure you're seeing the whole picture. So a big part of this amendment is simplifying that by moving things to the same place so that when an employee looks up and wants to see what their vacation allocation is or their sick time or how they get placed on the grid and why, it's in one place for them to look at. Now, not everything can be moved to one place, so we're still going to have an ordinance and we're still going to have a policy and procedure manual. So if we send the whole thing back, the grid changes on October 1, and that's Sunday. And so that's I don't know how we would navigate that. We haven't talked about that. So I would say sort of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. So the better option is probably to just ask your chair here if he will commit to putting this as an agenda item on the next County Board Staff Committee, and then they can discuss it and talk about all of the things that are incumbent upon changing that policy.
So I would like to ask that, please.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Supervisor Woodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just due to the concerns and some of the confusion, I would move to postpone this until the second meeting in October.
Zorro seconds.
We have a motion to postpone the item until the second October meeting, Ron? Okay. We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Supervisor Peer? She's on the, she would have been the next. I have everybody in order that I saw their cards, so yes. Supervisor Stevens. Supervisor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to take a moment to address how we got here. When we implemented the wage grid, one of the things that we did was we reduced the percentage between the steps. Now, what that did is that forced some employees out beyond the last step on the grid. There would have been some people who had been there anyway, but we pushed more people out there. I think there's a very good argument to be made for addressing the red circling, and the argument to be made has to do with the original McGrath study was set up to have the bottom of the scale represent the bottom of market scale, the top of the scale representing the top of the market scale, and the midpoint being the middle point. When we changed it, when we compressed it by going to the smaller percentage between the steps, what is at the top of the scale now does not represent the top of market. It represents something less than top of market. So I think the argument for changing the red circling falls there. That said, I think that the analogy of throwing out the baby with the bathwater is an apt one. I think we need to address this issue so that the wage grid can be implemented October 1st, as was suggested. And then we have a very clean matter to deal with that the chair has already indicated can come to the staff committee. At that point, we'll be able to specifically look at that percentage increase, or the red circling. We'll be able to look at that. We'll be able to look at the financial implications of that step as well. So what I'm suggesting is moving forward, not delaying the implementation at this point, approving it, and then dealing with that one issue that is an issue very worthy of discussion. Thank you.
Supervisor Crary.
Thank you, Board Chair. I thank you, Supervisor Wilson, for that explanation. I think that that probably helped a lot of us. I'm curious, is the only language concerning redlining, oh, now I can't find it again. I apologize. Line 92 and 3? Or are there other, is there other language pertaining to redlining, or red circling rather, in the ordinance?
So the language that I read for Supervisor Knudsen is in the ordinance. It's 18.4.110. That language that I read would not be contained specifically in the resolution that was presented today, because we were not asking to change that language.
Okay.
So that's not in your resolution that you have there.
Okay.
But it is within our document. So you could go out to our county website and pull up the entire ordinance, but it would be 18.4.10 is the language that I read for
18.4.10.
Supervisor Knudsen.
Thank you. because I think in my mind, you know, a lot of times with resolutions, if we're not decided on something, but we need to get something done, we'll kind of remove that portion, and then we revisit at a later date to add it back in. And I understand what Corp Counsel Greenlee was saying about having, it's kind of imperative to have this implemented so that the wage grid, I apologize, can take effect, and it would throw things kind of out of balance if we didn't do this now. So, yeah. I just really hope, I would like to see County Board Staff Committee revisit all of the concerns that were brought up by the employees via email, tonight speaking. And I think this was definitely a labor for all of us to approve this wage grid. And I don't know that had I known that this was going to be kind of the effect, my vote would have been the way it was. So that being said, I would vote to put it through with the assumption and the promise that we would revisit the red circling for these employees. Thank you.
Supervisor Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Greenlee, would you repeat again the ramifications of delaying this into October? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm probably not the best one who understands all of the ramifications. Amy and Josh have put their nose to it a lot more than I have, and they probably would have some better answers about the details.
Sure. So at County Board Staff Committee, there was policy changes made in the administrative policies and procedures. That included the language that's being proposed tonight to be removed from the ordinance because of the order that has to come with our policies and the implementation of October 1st. Some of those policy changes are directly related to the salary grid. So we would effectively, if we did not make our policy changes within the policies and procedures manual, not here in the ordinance, we now have a grid that contradicts our ordinance language, our policies and procedures, but we're going to try to still implement a grid so that we have now different versions of how implementation, so it's going to be contradictory in a number of areas if we don't approve the ordinance, because the policy and procedure obviously has already been approved. If we don't approve it today, we would be implementing a grid with language being returned into the ordinance, who now is contained in both the ordinance and the policies and procedures, and is contradictory to the grid that you all approved. Is there anything that you would add to that? Okay.
Supervisor Towns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I just have a comment to follow up from Supervisor Wilson's explanation, because that was very clear and very good. And the one thing, and I believe this is correct, Josh, correct me if I'm not, but the reason that we had to compress the steps was because we kept taking money out for the cost of living increase. And so the amount of money that ended up going into the wage grid was reduced because we had already given it out. Correct?
Yeah, there were two reasons really for the significant changes. One was that, yes, as you may remember, the board had passed the 3% cost of living adjustment effective January that was originally proposed to be part of the wage grid effective in January, and so that pushed off implementation until October. The other piece that also directly led to the compression that Supervisor Wilson referenced was when the County Board Staff Committee and ultimately the County Board made adjustments to the wage grid to place staff with certain levels of years of seniority at no later than step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, based on how many years they've been with the county. That cost more money, and based on the finite pie of money that was dedicated, the way that was recaptured to fund that seniority at the front end was, to Supervisor Wilson said, compress the steps, the distance between each step, which then pulled down that top step and left, at the time the estimate was 46 staff, would be at the top. Before that compression occurred, there were going to be 6 above, and so that was responsible for the additional staff that were left above the top step in their ranges.
Thank you. And so that was my comment, but I do have a question too. And I do understand urgency maybe, or critical timing of doing this before October 1st, of getting this passed. So if we pass this the way it is, does the full board even have authority to come back and do anything about redlining, or will it become the responsibility of administration?
Yeah, red circling is still in the ordinance, so any changes to red circling would require a new resolution, public hearing, and then discussion as we're having right now on a future ordinance change. So yes, the red circling changes would have to come back to the full board.
And a follow-up question, if I may. Is there a reason that we cannot, that we couldn't pass this and leave it in the ordinance and not move it to the policy?
Red circling is not being moved.
Not just red circling, but this, all of the changes that you're changing in the ordinance, that we couldn't leave it, the changes, and vote for it tonight, and it would still have the same impact, would it not?
So I'm not sure I'm understanding exactly, but if you vote for the changes that are here tonight, that would remove the language from those 23 different areas, consolidation areas I talked about, it's already in the policies and procedures. It would remove it from the ordinance. So a vote for yes tonight approves this as in front of you and removes that language. So if you want to not remove that language, then you'd vote no, and that would create some inconsistencies that we'd have to deal with until the next time we could bring the tweaks back to you to make it match or something, so it's not inconsistent. So I don't know if that answers your question.
I can maybe add a little bit of color to it as well, okay, I'm going to give some history here. Prior to Act 10, many of our employee groups were bargained, right? So we had a series of collective bargaining agreements that controlled the conditions of employment for many of our employees across the county. At the termination of Act 10, we had basically an ordinance that controlled general HR policies via an ordinance. And then what happened was that many of the provisions, in fact, almost all of the provisions that were contained for individual employee groups that had specific work condition language were wrapped up into a policy and procedure manual, and then that was adopted, and that sort of became the employee handbook. Many communities across Wisconsin did this, right? We were not the only one. But in that handbook, the way that the different treatment of different employees was managed was by still labeling the employee groups as if they were unions, right? It was AFSCME, AMHS, all of the different employee groups. One of the major changes that's occurring via this transfer of language from the ordinance to the policy procedure manual is the elimination of that paradigm of treatment. We are going to straight job description, many job descriptions, or maybe employee titles are going to be the same across departments. And so even though those two employees may have been treated differently if they were in different departments because they were in different employee groups, they are going into the same bucket and they're going to be treated the same now. I don't know off the top of my head how much of that change would be affected, but if you do not amend the ordinance, there will be some inconsistencies with the ordinance and the policy and procedure manual, creating a circumstance where the ordinance will trump, and we will have changed the nature of the employee group paradigm to reflect the salary study without changing the ordinance. Will create a lot of weird dynamics between the old way of managing the employee groups and the new salary study, which will be implemented on October 1st.
Thanks. I do understand that. It's just, I'm wondering why we can't keep it in the same why we can't eliminate them. I don't know, maybe it's.
You can think of it like statutes and administrative rules with the
Right.
state, right?
Right.
And so the statute trumps. And so if the statute no longer is applicable to the way we operate, then that becomes a problem because we don't really know what to do.
But administrative law always comes back for a legislative vote. It has to be approved.
Now it does.
And-
It
yeah.
didn't used to.
But this will no longer come back for a full vote. Any changes in the handbook never come to the board, correct?
They have at times, so I wouldn't say they never come back to the board, but that would be outside the ordinary course of the way we operate, yeah. There have been some occasions we've taken policy changes to the whole board via resolution when they've been like really big, massive policy changes, and we thought it was important, or somebody, whether it's a board chair, or, thought it was important that the whole board get a voice. But the routine way of doing it is to have that policy change go just to the committee.
Yeah. And that's kind of, that change in process is probably what bothers me more than the details.
Yeah, and I think just to maybe just kind of follow up, I think if the board's wishes is to keep the approval at the board level, then, setting aside the timing, what you would do is essentially vote no on this and then undo what we did, at staff committee, and essentially take the staff committee language, which is the updated language that is consistent with the new wage grid, and then have the board put that into the ordinance, right? I mean, that would be the steps you would take, because right now it's already in place at staff committee's approval of the policy procedure manual. This language taken out here would make that match. It would just take a series of steps to flip that, essentially, to make that happen.
And that's what I was trying to ask, why you couldn't do it that way, and it would still be under the full board's purview, but.
And you could do it that way. I think it's just, you probably can't effectuate that tonight with what's in front of you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Cullen.
Josh, if we approve this tonight, what bad happens?
I guess it depends on who you ask.
I'm asking you.
So from my perspective, I mean, nothing bad happens if you approve this tonight. That is our ask of you, is to make the harmonize the language between policy and procedures in the ordinance. Again, that's the staff perspective. I think the bad things, I think what has been communicated is that the bad things that could happen is if people feel like the board is giving up some authority that it wants to keep, right? I mean, we always struggle a little bit with this, and you hear me talk about things on a continuum, right? So if this is sort of no approval by the board, and this is the board approves everything, and in the middle is staff committee, or in this case, right? I mean, how does the board want to spend its time? And the board cannot approve every single thing, that happens in the county, right? That's obviously, even at a policy level, right? That's why we have the ordinance, which is in front of the board. We have policy and procedure manuals, not only for HR, but for finance and other things that are approved by a committee. And then we have department work rules, right, that the departments create. And those aren't approved by any committee at all, right? They're just sort of implementing, here's some processes that we need to have to make this department run well. So, what is appropriate in each of those things is really ultimately up to the board, but the board has to decide how it wants to spend its time and what is important for it to approve. And that's a legitimate policy discussion for the board to have. Staff's perspective, and why we brought this to you, is we feel the appropriate balance there is what we've offered to you, to try to, for the reasons that I said, I won't repeat them. So that's my perspective, but others certainly can disagree about the appropriate policy role and what falls in that of the board.
Supervisor Zorl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to recommit to the staff committee.
I'm not sure
We
you
have an
can. Let me
amendment.
look it up really
Second.
quick. There's an order of precedence for motions, and I'm not sure that while a motion to postpone is pending, you can do a motion to recommit, so I need to look that up. I apologize. It's going to take me a second.
And Mr. Chair, just to be clear, the motion to recommit is for the entire thing, not just a slice.
Yeah.
No, we have to dispose, because the motion to postpone is to a time certain, so we need to dispose of that first, and then a motion to recommit would be in order.
I move to call the question.
Is there a second? Supervisor Peer. Okay, we have a motion to call the question. If that is successful, debate is ended. If not, debate continues. This is roll call. Please vote.
Supervisor Winter? Yes, 22, no 2, 3 absent, 2 vacant. 16 needed to pass.
That takes us back to the motion to postpone until the second October meeting, which would be October 26th. All in favor? Oh, this is roll call, excuse me. Please vote.
Supervisor Schultz? Yes, 9, no 15, 3 absent, 2 vacant.
Okay, the motion to postpone fails. We now go to the motion to recommit the entire motion to County Board Staff Committee. Discussion, questions?
Mr. Chair, there needs to be a first and a second.
Oh, yeah, let's get that on the floor first. Supervisor Zorl, seconded by Supervisor Stevens. Discussion? Supervisor Wilson.
I would argue, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would argue that the quickest way for us to address the red circling issue is to approve and then deal with the red circling issue as a standalone issue. I fear that what will happen if we don't do that is that we're going to be spending a lot of time undoing what we've just done tonight, and it's going to take us longer to get to the red circling issue that we want to address. Thank you.
Supervisor Zorl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's a lot easier to get this all worked out and figured out and make sure everybody understands what we're doing. If it's done in a committee structure, you've only got 8 people to talk back and forth, and here we've got a full board and it's a bit confusing. So on that basis, I really think it does make sense to send it back to the staff committee, let them work it out, and then by the time it gets back here to the board, we'll have a better idea of what's going on.
Other comments, questions? Supervisor Cullen.
Isn't it fair to say that the committee already worked it out?
Well, the committee came to decisions, so in a word, yes. Okay, this will be roll call. Again, this is a motion to recommit the entire motion to county board staff. Roll call, please vote.
Supervisor Schultz? Yes, 9, no 15, 3 absent, 2 vacant. said you voted no, Supervisor Sutherland? I'll note that in the record, that you voted no.
Okay, that returns us back to the main motion. Additional discussion. Supervisor Zorro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what we have before us right now is to just approve it as is, as we have it in front of us. And I would argue that we should not do that. I would argue we should vote no. And the biggest reason for that is a lot of the same concerns that I have that Supervisor Towns had. I know over the last several months, I've been getting a lot of constituent emails from Rock County employees that are concerned about various different issues, wage grid issues, other issues, etc. And what we're doing here is we're streamlining things by saying, let's get rid of the ordinances and instead put them in the employee policy. And when you put them in one spot, it's a lot easier to manage. I would argue that it's, I wouldn't disagree that it's on that, but I would say if we're going to put them in one spot, let's put it in the ordinance as opposed to the policy. And the reason for that is because there's 29 supervisors, but there's only 9 people on the staff committee. Our employees are our number one resource. It's also our number one budget issue. So as our constituents in our various districts are concerned about budget issues, tax issues, the employees in Rock County that live in our districts, if they come to us and they say, I have this problem at work, can you please take a look at this policy because it's just not working for us right now. Well, me as the supervisor in District 14, the best I can tell them right now is I'll submit a resolution. It'll go to the staff committee where I have no vote. And if it never leaves the staff committee, I never get a vote on it at the board. And I'm not the only one. There's 20 of us here in this room that would have no vote. So I don't believe we should be giving up our duties and our responsibilities to just a single committee of 9 people, assuming, there's a vacancy right now, 8 people, 9 when it's filled. Especially when the staff committee, although it's made up of elected supervisors, the mix of that committee was not democratically elected. It was appointed. It's our number one resource. It's our number one expense. It's the number one issue that's affecting our taxes. And we're losing way too much control. 20 people on this board will have no vote. And on that basis, I'm voting no.
Other comments, questions? Seeing none, this is roll call. Please vote.
Yes, 17, no, 7, 3 absent, 2 vacant.
Okay, motion passes. Next item, please.
Next item is E4, awarding contract for shelter care services.
Moved by Supervisor Knutson, seconded by Supervisor Stevens. Supervisor Knutson.
I would defer to Director Kate Lester.
Good evening. This resolution requests authorization for us to enter into contract again with Derek's House LLC, which is our provider for shelter care. The shelter care operation for Human Services is a critical part of our continuum of serving youth, and in particular serves our youth who have nowhere else to go and are typically in between placements or waiting for us to find an appropriate placement. So these are youth involved in our Child Protective Services and youth justice programs. And we did a request for proposals for this operation earlier this year. We had Derek's House as the only proposer. and they are our current provider and partner in this effort, and we would like to continue this shelter care operation through an ongoing contract with them.
Questions, Supervisor Stevens?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for pulling this off of the consent agenda so that I could discuss this. First of all, I am very happy with Derek's House and very happy that this service is in Rock County. The only questions actually that I had was the section down here that talk about the funding for Derek's House. It says that the funds will need to be included in the 2024 budget for these services. It sounds like there's going to be a request for these funds in the budget. So there's, at this point, the request is going to be made, but it's not certain that you're going to get the funding, correct?
So correct. So it's a little bit, seems a little bit awkward from a timing perspective. We included funding for this contract, adequate funding per what we're requesting in our budget proposal that I submitted to the county administrator.
Okay.
And because the county administrator has not proposed a budget and you have not approved a budget yet, we're not able to make a statement in this resolution that, like we typically would, to say there is money included in the budget. However, because this is one of our largest contracts, we have an interest in seeking approval for the contract ahead of the budget approval in the middle of November, because it gives our provider, Derek's House, assurance that our plan is to continue with them in January, assuming that the budget is approved. If we wait until the budget passes to come to you, we are leaving a key provider with a lot at stake, waiting to hear whether we are committed to contract with them, and we'd like to not do that.
Okay, so another question. Have we already been working with Derek's House? Have we already partnered with Derek's House? And if so, how long have we been working with
I think
Derek's House?
this is our 5th year contracting with Derek's House.
And are we happy with Derek's House services?
Yes,
so
we've
far?
been happy with services.
Okay, so this question is for Josh. We have $1.5 million left that we were going to use $3 million from the small business ARPA funds, and we only used 1.5, right, for childcare.
Yes, there's
Okay.
remaining funds, yes.
So can we use ARPA dollars for this, since they're looking for funding for, and we're not quite sure where that's going to come from? Is this eligible for ARPA dollars? I mean, we did use $3 million for a park, so ARPA dollars for a park. So is this eligible for ARPA dollars?
Yeah, so I mean, the difference with the park is that was from the lost revenue bucket, which was allowed to be used for anything.
Right, and we used $3 million for transitional living, right? It was 3.
Correct, yeah,
So
yeah,
is
correct.
this eligible for ARPA?
I mean, it would seem on its face, but I would have to go, I mean, I would hate to commit without actually looking at the array of services. I know generally, obviously what they are, but I would hate to commit without looking into it more.
Okay, so those were the questions that I wanted to ask. Is it possible to use the remaining 1.5 million for this project?
Oh, right, yeah, so the point Sherry's making is that it could be possible, just the point, the reminder would be that it would be a temporary, like we'd have to use our other resources in out years, when the ARPA funds run out, but still, it still might be eligible, we just have to.
Yeah, because I noticed this was just a one-year contract. So since this is just a one-year contract, and they're only asking for 1.1, is it possible to use the 1.1 of the remaining 1.5, since this is just a one-year contract?
Yeah, it would be possible if it was eligible, which is what I'd have to look into before I give you a definitive answer.
So what do I need to do since you say we need to do this by November, so that they know what would need to be
Yep,
done to kind of
yep.
work on this?
Yeah, process-wise, so as Kate said, she has requested funds as we fund this through, tax levy, for example, and I don't know, maybe there's other sources in there. So that is in her request, and that is on my plate now. 2 weeks from tonight, I will present that to you, and then you can go through everything. So I think the easiest thing to do at this point for any member to effectuate something that is a funding-related thing in the budget is, once you see the budget submittal, to evaluate what's in it and the funding sources are, and then make amendments, as it goes through committee or when the budget is adopted, if there's different funding sources that you want to use that are different than what is in the recommended budget. I would say that would be probably the process at this point.
Okay, thank you. Those are my only questions.
Supervisor Zorro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it sounds like we're working with these people right now, and we have been for 5 years. And you're asking for $1.11 million. How much are we spending with this organization right now in 2023's budget?
That $1.1 million represents about a 9% increase budget year to budget year. And so that increase is driven by significant inflation costs related. So this is a home being operated, so all of the same inflationary costs around food and utilities and running a life. And then in addition, we have asked them to increase their staffing patterns to better meet the needs of what evolving and more complex needs of youth. And so, and then there are also some additional audit requirements that we're asking them to meet so that we can be in compliance with our state obligations. The combination of those expectations together is what's driving that 9% increase budget year to budget year.
So the 24 amount is a 9% increase versus what we're paying now in 23.
Yes.
And what we're paying in 23, how is that being funded? Is it property taxes? Is it sales taxes? Where's the money coming from right now?
I don't have the exact breakout in front of me, but it's, this part of our budget is a combination of state and federal funding and tax levy. I can provide the board with a more specific breakout of this particular line item and what the exact revenue sources are, but I don't have that with me right now.
The services that are being provided, is it possible that this could be used, you know, if a police officer goes to a house and finds a victim of child sex trafficking, could this be used for that?
Potentially. This is a facility that is licensed by the Department of Children and Families under Administrative Code under DCF 59. So there are regulations about a lot of what we can use this for and how Derek's House operates. We definitely have youth who are served there who are at risk of or have been involved in trafficking. That's youth involved in child welfare and youth justice are at risk of that. And so it would not be uncommon for there to be that vulnerability or that risk or that experience among the youth that are placed. But there's specific criteria for placement related to what our legal authority and custodial authority is over youth in any given situation. There are some examples of voluntary placements that can be placed. Parents can choose or request voluntary placements at Derek's House, but those are not the common use of that. Usually these are kids that we have custody of already in our system. So those may or may not involve risk of or experience with trafficking.
So right now it says it's a 10-bed facility. Are you usually maxed out at those 10 beds?
Our average daily census this year has been 7. And we will use up to the 10 beds max, and we are also aware that when we have a full house, the staffing challenges are even greater. If you have a couple kids with more complex needs, it's easier to have not every bed filled or to have somebody with their own rooms, et cetera. So average daily census of 7.
So if we're paying for 10, on average we're using 7. That means on average we'll have 3 open on average. And maybe, and it sounds like it's a maybe, that those on average 3 open beds could be used potentially for victims of human trafficking. But it sounds like maybe you're not sure?
Well, no, what I'm trying to say is that there are specific requirements for who can be placed here and how under DCF 59. And so we have statutory authority under our CPS and youth justice statutes and codes. And so that is the purpose of this facility, is to use it for those kids that we don't have anywhere else to go. We have authority for making sure they have somewhere to live and are cared for, and we don't have another option.
Is there a way to take a look at those specific requirements and make a request that we can expand those requirements to make it a little bit more flexible. Is that even a possibility?
I mean, we would want to be able to use the facility in whatever constructive way we can, but we would have to look at there's a lot of legalities involved in the who and the how of our placing a child here. So we would have to look at what are the situations in which, it's all for children, it's not for adults. And if a child is in need of a place to live, there's a lot of other legal things that are happening that would need to align with the requirements of this facility.
And Kate, let me just add a little bit to that on the legal side, because those legalities are set by federal statute, state statute, and state administrative code. The county has almost nothing to do with it in terms of setting the policy. So we follow a state standards. And in every case in which a CPS worker or juvenile justice worker is going to take custody of a child and remove them from their parents' care, there is an order of precedence to the placement options that they are going to follow through, most frequently with family, then with foster home, then with group home, and at the very end is shelter care. And so we try not to place kids at shelter care if we can avoid it, because we know that placements at other locations are far more beneficial to kids.
So we know that this is funded with state, federal, and tax levy, and we don't know the exact numbers. Do you have approximate numbers? Because
I don't want to speculate about that. I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but I can certainly, we have access to that, and I can send this out to you tomorrow.
Mr. Greenlee, procedurally, obviously, we don't want to replace anything that's state and federal money with ARPA, but if we could use ARPA to replace the tax levy portion, I'd be all in favor of that. The issue is, I have a total here, but I don't know how much of it is tax levy. So the procedural question in this case is, can I make a motion to use ARPA for the tax levy portion, whatever that happens to be, and amend this directing Josh to use ARPA for the 2024 budget without having that exact number? Or would we need to table this for, say, a meeting and then come back and then give the exact number?
Whether you have the exact number or not, it's not going to matter legally. The administrator is going to submit a budget in 2 weeks, and that budget's going to have money allocated in it for this resource, and that the revenue sources and expenditure sources would be articulated. Regardless of whether you put a line in a resolution or not, is probably not going to affect what he chooses to do.
So I move to add a line that says, be it further resolved that the county administrator use ARPA funding to cover what the otherwise tax levy would be in 2024.
If allowed under the ARPA rules.
Yeah, if allowed under the ARPA rules.
Did I hear a second out there? Gina Stevens? Discussion? Discussion? Supervisor Zorro?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to say I think Supervisor Stevens has an excellent idea. I love that idea, and it's effectively a tax cut, so it's great. I'm voting yes.
Other comments, questions? Supervisor Schultz?
As I recall, I think one of the strong benefits of this facility was that in the past, the other option was to send them out of state.
Supervisor Schultz, could you turn your microphone on so the folks can hear you?
Was that not one of the benefits to this facility?
Yes, that's a significant benefit of the facility, is that it prevents us from having to place kids that we cannot find placement for locally or within the state, out of state, and gives us some time to find those placements. And it is just to make, in case I haven't spoken clearly about this isn't an initiative for a short time period. This is an important part of our ongoing operations and continuum. And so it is something that if we, however we fund it, if we have challenges budget year to budget year in filling holes, that creates some insecurity for us about how we will continue to fund that and provide assurances to contracted providers. And so to date, since we have been operating this, we've been using the blend of local, federal, and state dollars as an important part of our operational budget. And have requested to do the same, so.
Supervisor Crary.
Thank you, Board Chair. That answered my question. Because I think, I agree, I think if we can use ARPA dollars and create some type of a tax cut, that would be wonderful. However, then we're back to the position that we've been in before, where we're offering one-time remedies for budget items that need to be in continuum. And I don't know what that would look like then next year when Josh and the department, you know, when you are trying to set forth a budget. So I would be for perhaps giving Derek's House a one-time, you know, bolster of funds. But I'm concerned about what that would look like without that 1.5 next year. So, and where that would lie in our budget. So I'm not committed to doing this. I guess that's all I have. Thanks.
Supervisor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a one-year contract, and since it's a one-year contract and you would have to be figuring out after the 1 year anyway, I'm not sure what the concern is about one-time money for a one-year contract. So, ARPA dollars.
Do you want me to, go ahead.
No, I think the difference is that even though it's a one-year contract, you know, as Kate had noted, we've been doing this for 5 years, and we would expect to continue to do it in year 7, you know, so even though it's a one-year contract, it is an ongoing operational cost. And so I think the point that Kate made about certainty is just that, you know, using a one-time source to fill what operates like an operational cost creates uncertainty about future funding years when ARPA is not available anymore. So I think that's the point about the one-time funding. It's certainly something that if it was eligible, we could be done, and it would just have a potential consequence in a future year with being needed to fill in with levy when the ARPA money is away.
Okay, well, I understand that, but we did provide one-time funding to a child care resolution recently, so I don't see why we can't provide one-time funding to Derek's House. So, thank you.
Supervisor Zorl.
Supervisor Stevens makes excellent points. I agree with those points. However, if there is somebody on the board that, let's say, doesn't agree with those points, there is a workaround solution for that. And what we could do is we could amend the amendment by saying that tax levy amount that is currently funded under tax levy that is moving to ARPA, we could further amend it and say that amount would then go shift over to be paid down on the debt service levy for that 1 year. And then you don't create this structural deficit, because in year 2, if you don't have the ARPA money anymore, you just reduce the amount of debt service levy and then boom, shifts right over and it starts paying this contract again. So effectively, you've got that 1 year taken care of, and you also don't get into a situation where, yeah, I paid for it ARPA this year, I blew the money on something else that's required year after year, and then you don't have this hole in year 2. Now, I think we paid Josh enough money that he'd be smart enough to just figure out how to do this without doing that. You know, just put on a Post-it note and be like, remember, you got to cover it in year 2. But if the board is really concerned about that, somebody should make a motion to amend the amendment and let it sit 1 year in debt service levy, shift it over in year 2, and that money's safe.
Others? Okay, seeing none, would you read the motion back for us, Lisa?
So if you don't have it correct, please let me know. Be it further resolved that the county administrator use ARPA funding to cover funding not covered by other sources in the 2024 budget if allowed under the rules of ARPA.
Roll call, please vote.
Yes, 10, 14 no, 3 absent, 2 vacant.
Okay, that returns us back to the main motion. Discussion? Supervisor Zorro?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to hear some discussion from the people voting no to understand where they're coming from.
We don't engage in discussion among supervisors that way. Other discussion? Supervisor Woodman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the best solution here is to go ahead and pass the funding, and then we can come back later and try to insert ARPA funding if it would work out. Thank you.
Others? Supervisor Crary?
Thank you, Board Chair. When Supervisor Stevens asked about Derek's house, I was appreciative of that communication because it gave me a little more information. And the way I understood her question to Josh was what would be the best way for us to try to insert ARPA funding into funding this. And he stated that when he makes his budget proposal in a few weeks, we could then bring that up. And I agree with Supervisor Woodman. I don't see why that isn't still on the table and can't be on the table, and we didn't need to complicate it. I voted no because we didn't need to complicate it with amendments. We can go back during the budget process and ask to have that done. So, thank you.
Others? Supervisor Zorro?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to be clear why that was so important. The issue is Josh, when you come with your budget, hypothetically, you could take a look at the vote and be like, well, the board on average, or overall, the majority of the board didn't want to do it. So I'm going to propose that we use that ARPA money for something else, which you could do. At which point, the board, excuse me, the board could say, well, yeah, we like that idea that was proposed for this contract, but Josh has it on this other project. So now, if we still want to do it, we have to take money away from that other project. And now, to get a positive, you also have a negative. So it is way more viable doing it now. And that's my comment.
Others? Supervisor Sutherland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an ongoing project. Yes. This will be the 6th year or the 5th year?
I think we're on year number 6 with Derek's house. We've been operating shelter care for well before my years here. It just used to be operated in our youth services center. And it was so a lot more, it was almost felt like these kids who are essentially needing a homeless shelter were incarcerated, and we wanted a more home-like setting. So in 2018, I believe it was, we shifted and our model and started contracting in this way with Derek's house, moving toward the model that we're using now. But we've been providing shelter care services and funding it for decades, right? Yes, so it's not anything that, if we removed it from the budget altogether, we would be in a very, if we didn't have funding for it or didn't have assured funding to somehow meet this operational need, we would be in crisis around where to place youth. They wouldn't be able to be in our community. They would be out of state. Best case scenario in other counties. And so it is a very important service and part of our continuum that we have provided operationally forever, essentially. It's just we're looking to renew the contract with our current provider at this time.
I understand. And so I think it's something that we should assure that it's going to happen and put this in the budget and not use the if on ARPA funds. Thank you.
Supervisor Zorro?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to do this, a similar motion, except this time specifically name $1.5 million of ARPA, except spread it out over 3 years. So 500,000, up to 500,000 to cover tax levy for 24, up to 500,000 to cover 25, up to 500,000 to cover 26. You've got guaranteed funding for 3 years.
Supervisor Crary?
Please, thank you, Board Chair. Refresh my memory, doesn't ARPA have to be spent by a certain date?
So before we engage in a bunch
We
of
need a
discussion,
second.
we need a second.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Supervisor Crary?
Yes, end of 2026 has to be spent by, has to be allocated by the end of 2024 and spent by the end of 2026.
Other discussion? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Lisa.
I wanted
Oh,
to.
oh, yeah. Supervisor Stevens?
So if I'm understanding correctly, I don't know if this is a concern by more than one person. Was the concern that there was too much uncertainty and there was an if, and that there needed to be more clarity on exactly whether or not the ARPA funds were going to be used? And so now that there's the amendment of making the amendment to say, yes, the 1.5 is going to be used and spreading it out over 3 years, that means it's going to be committed, which is my understanding of how ARPA dollars are supposed to be used as well, committed by December 31st, 2024, and spent by December 31st, 2026, is my understanding of what this amendment is, correct? Is that my understanding of what the new amendment is?
Yeah, that is the intent of the amendment. Just to be clear, it's a direction. You know, it doesn't actually amend the budget, right? That's still true, right? But this would, you're right, it would comply with those parameters, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other discussion? Lisa, please read back the motion.
Supervisor Beaver has her hand up.
Oh, Supervisor Beaver?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How much do we have left in ARPA funds? Approximate.
Well, it depends how you ask that question. So right now, is about, if I remember correctly, there's about $800,000 that's not yet been allocated anywhere. That's still, the board has never put that in any bucket to spend. It's $800,000. There is, it depends on whether you think the allocated funds in those various other projects are going to be spent, either by the end of '24, when you have time to reallocate it, or by the end of '26. And so that's a different question. I mean, I think there are a number of, and I don't know the answer to that because I would have to be speculating on how much might be not spent. I think there are some projects that are a little more definitive about whether the money will be spent or not spent than others. And so it's speculative, but I would say right now, I mean, there's probably, you know, several $1 million. I think Supervisor Stevens mentioned the small business program is maybe having some funding available. The homelessness matching program, we didn't award all of that when that was approved by the board. So there's several projects out there like that.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what is not allocated.
Yeah, and that's the $800-ish thousand.
Thank you.
Others? Lisa, please read the motion back for us.
Move to commit $1.5 million of ARPA funds, up to $500,000 for the next 3 years.
This is roll call. Please vote.
Supervisor Peer? Yes, 10, 14 no, 3 absent, 2 vacant.
Back to the main motion. Supervisor Zorro?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Same motion, but $267,000 of ARPA for the next 3 years. That would take us to $800,000.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Can you clarify your motion, please?
It would be committing $800,000 of ARPA funds over a 3-year spread evenly, so like 266 point, trailing out. Contingent on if it's allowable, yep.
Second.
Discussion?
Yes, I just want to make sure that does not mean that Derek's House won't get the full 1.1. That's what I want to make sure of.
It would not change and this is maybe a very good point. The resolution's to approve the contract. The operative legal language in the resolution approves a contract for the value of the contract. It does almost nothing else. You can add all these words you want. The county administrator could choose to follow them or not choose to follow them. They are not legally binding on the county administrator when he submits his budget. The other thing that I would just as I was sitting here, I was thinking about if people are understanding that the ARPA dollars would be used instead of tax levy and that tax levy would be used as a tax cut, that would violate the ARPA. The ARPA requires that money not be used to supplant other forms of funding. And so if you do use ARPA money to take over the tax levy portion of the Derek's House contract, that tax levy must be reallocated in someplace else.
Point of order. Perhaps point of parliamentary inquiry. The supplant rule, that only applies for spending that's been committed. In other words, that's in reverse, and because we're talking about something in the future, would that not then apply?
I'd have to look at it. I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, you might be right, but the supplanting rules the federal government has are not particularly simple. They can be pretty complex. So they could interpret the contract having been signed as a commitment, and therefore, once the budget is out after the contract has been signed, that could mean those funds would be supplanted. I don't know.
Supervisor Levy.
I have a crazy question. Did I hear you correctly that you just said, no matter what we decide, it doesn't have to be followed?
That is correct. So
why are we going through all of this nonsense if we're going to pass it and it doesn't have to be followed? It just makes no sense to me that we've spent in the last half hour, 45 minutes on something that's not going to have an impact. So with that, I'll call the question.
The motion has been called, seconded by Supervisor Bob Zine. This will be roll call. If you want debate to end, vote yes. If you want to keep talking about it, vote no. Please vote.
Yes, 23, no 1, 3 absent, 2 vacant.
Okay, that takes us back to the amendment that was spending $267,000.
Yeah, so the amendment that was pending was made by Zorel, seconded by Stevens for $800,000 of ARPA funds over 3 years.
Okay, this is roll call. Please vote.
Yes, 9, no 15, 3 absent, 2 vacant.
Back to the main motion. Any further discussion? Roll call, please vote.
Yes, 24, no 0, 3 absent, 2 vacant.
Next item, please.
Next item is adjournment.
Moved by Supervisor Sweeney, second by Supervisor Crary. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?